Welcome everybody to Running Denver TV. I'm your host Lonnie Summers. We're so glad to have you back with us. I hope you all had a fantastic July. We've been on hiatus for a few weeks, actually taking a little vacation time, but we're back. We've got a really good show for you today. We're going to be talking about injury prevention and what to do when you have an injury, which actually I'm experiencing that myself, and it can be really frustrating when you're a runner because you just want to get out and run, and it's really frustrating when you can't. But we need to be smart about coming back from injuries so we can avoid things like the operation table and even a longer hiatus of 18 months to 2 years, depending upon the type of injuries we have. So we're going to talk with a great doctor who's actually my doctor, and about some injury prevention tips. We're going to be doing review, preview. We had an amazing past weekend and some amazing events coming up. And we're also going to be talking about gadgets. We're going to be reviewing about GPS watches. I remember 5-10 years ago when they first came out, they were clunky, they were big. Now they all fit into your little tiny watch. They're very powerful, but there's so many choices, so how do you know which one to do? We are at a really cool location as well, and I'd like to see if you can figure out where we're at. I'm going to give you a couple hints. One, you might come across a lot of wildlife here, and two, there's a lot of space. Stay tuned, we'll be right back on Running Denver. Welcome back everybody to Running Denver TV. We are in a really cool, beautiful location. This is actually one of my favorite locations around the Denver metro area. Believe it or not, we are very close to the Denver metro area. Have you figured out where we're at yet? I mentioned space, I mentioned wildlife. I mentioned space because it's really close to Lockheed Martin, which we all know it does a lot of work for NASA and the space program. And wildlife, you can see bighorn sheep here, deer, sometimes the occasional bear, even the occasional steak, which definitely gets the runners going a little bit faster. We are in beautiful Waterton Canyon. Gorgeous along here. If you've never been here, it's a really great, easy area to run, or even if you like to come for a hike or even bike. You'll see a lot of bikers along here. It's just to the southwest area of Denver. You just go to Wadsworth, take C470 to Wadsworth, Wadsworth South. Can't miss it. Just don't go into Lockheed Martin, you'll be all fine. You'll find the parking lot, and the trailhead is right here. It's a really nice wide path road. Occasionally there's a little bit of car traffic, and that's only because there's a couple residents, and it's actually part of Denver Water. But this is about a 6 to 7 mile of this nice long gated road. It is a dirt road, but it's very hard crushed, so it's very easy, and it's a nice gentle incline up. You've got the Platte River that comes through here. It's extremely beautiful back through the canyon. I'm selling it to you a lot because if you haven't been here, you got to come and check it out. And usually you will run into wildlife. A lot of bighorn sheep exist through here. The only thing is, remember, don't bring your dogs. They're not allowed in here because there is so much wildlife. They'll freak out the wildlife, and we want to keep your pets and the wildlife safe and pristine as they are. The other great thing about Waterton Canyon, many people may not know, it's actually the start of the trailhead for the Colorado Trail. The Colorado Trail starts, actually the True Junction starts up after about 6 miles on this. Colorado Trail runs over 300 miles, and you could take that for many, many days and head all the way to Durango. It goes up over mountain passes like Georgia Pass at over 11,000 feet, and some great area, beautiful area. A lot of people will go hike different sections on it. You can get to a lot of areas up through Georgetown, Idaho Springs area, Breckenridge, and then you can also start heading down 285 and catch a lot of great areas to check out the trail as well. So beautiful trail. If you haven't done it, come check it out. We're very excited to be here in Waterton Canyon to showcase some of its beauty. And coming up right now, we've got review and preview. This past weekend saw a ton of action in the running community, things happening all over the entire state. First was Chase the Moon. This is a fairly brand new event, only in its second year. Happens out at Backcountry in Highlands Ranch, which is where we were at a few shows ago. This is a 12-hour endurance run that starts at 7 p.m. and goes to 7 a.m. It's for solo runners as well as teams of 3 and 5. But the solos were quite amazing because Scott Swaney ran 61.8 miles over 12 hours, which actually, for some elites might sound like not a lot of miles, but besides, it's in backcountry and it's pretty hilly, so it's a really challenging course. And then Julie Settle was the female winner. Amazing thing about her, think about this, her second place was only 40 seconds behind her. Over 12 hours of running, and she won by just less than 40 seconds for that. And the 3-person relay, we're going to talk about Stu Crew, because they completed the most miles out of anybody, doing 68 one-point miles in 12 hours. An interesting thing, although this didn't happen out on the roads, we had an Evergreen man break the Guinness Book of World Record for running for 12 hours. He did a record for 81.62 miles. The previous record was 80.53 miles. The amazing thing about that is the record was done, I believe, in Colorado, so he was running it on a treadmill at altitude. The Boulder Ironman took a lot of action this weekend, and the top 3 men were all American finishers, all of them under 9 hours. Clay Imge was the winner in 8:45:20, followed in by Steve Mantell and Steve Johnson. The top 3 males was Francesca Tibaldi from Italy, followed in by Monica Folst and Heather Galnick. The Boulder Ironman has become quite a world-class event where a lot of the athletes are challenging themselves not only with an Ironman, but doing it at altitude. One other thing that we want to talk a little bit about, there's a ton of great events that took place this weekend, but something that made the Colorado Running Magazine headlines was Alani Zutch, who we've actually talked about before. She's 11 years old. She was actually running in the U.S. Mountain Running Championships. Not junior championships, not championships for kids, but the overall National Mountain Running Championships. She took 7th overall, if you can believe that. She's 11 years old. She actually missed qualifying for the U.S. national team by, I think, less than a minute, which is just amazing. But the more impressive thing is she beat Olympic trials champions, and she's 11 years old. So it's amazing to watch her take off and doing, just blowing the competition, because she's really tiny and she doesn't look like she's going to be a threat, but it's fun to watch her just knock down everybody along the way. And I know it probably makes a few of the older athletes feel like they need to retire. So that is our review section, and we're going to talk about our preview of some upcoming great events that we're going to be involved in. Georgetown to Idaho Springs Half Marathon is going to be doing its 37th annual event coming up this weekend. Starts in Idaho, actually starts in Georgetown. It's a nice downhill, finishes in Idaho Springs. If you've never done it, there's still time to register for that. The other thing coming up the following weekend is we have Precious Miles that'll be taking place in Thornton, and this is Precious Miles Run for the Money. They're going to actually have money out on the course, and you can run and find it, so you can get some really cool prizes and run for money and help a great cause. And then we have our long-standing traditional Race for Research taking place at Washington Park. This is a great 5K and 1 mile with a lot of great fun activities and a pancake breakfast, which you can't beat that. Specifically, one of our featured events is Mount Sniffles Marathon and Half Marathon. That's coming up this weekend, and we want to bring that to your attention because, first of all, if you've never been there, it's absolutely a gorgeous area. It's in Ouray, which is known as the Swiss Alps of Colorado. It is despite being in the Swiss Alps of Colorado, it's actually a pretty flat course for the marathon, and the half marathon is a nice, gentle, pretty much downhill into Ridgway from Ouray. But it's also a USATNF championship race, and the amount of talent there is going to be impressive. But don't be intimidated by it. It's a lot of fun, and here's something you might not realize. If you think you're in the mountains, you might think that just like Waterton Canyon, you might see some bighorn sheep and some deer. Well, chances are you're going to see a camel and some yak. Believe it or not, there's a camel farm and a yak farm. So only in Colorado and areas would you see things that you never thought you would encounter in wildlife and that. But again, the elites are going to be incredible. We've got Stanley Bowen, who has finished 4th in the Mount Sniffles half, but some of the, we have a lot of Kenyans going to be. Richard Kilimo, he won the 2015 Go St. Louis Marathon. We have Noah Jimnigabit, winner of 2015 Bar Trail and 2:15 at the 2015 Grandma's Marathon. Mario Marcias, 2-time defending Mount Sniffles half winner and course record holder. The list goes on. Jeffrey Tierer, who finished 3rd in the 2014 Mount Sniffles half and is an extremely fast runner. In the women's side, we have the ever-impressive Janet Sherabon Baucom, who's the 2012 10,000 meter Olympian and the 2014 Mount Sniffles half winner and course record holder. She's actually competes, she's an A elite, and she competes all over the world, so it's great to have her there. And then a good friend of mine, Heather Utrata, who's a 2-time Colfax Marathon winner and also has won the Denver Rock and Roll Marathon, is going to be there. It's our featured event. If you're interested in watching some of the action, we're at Running Denver, and along with Coach's Aid, is going to be there broadcasting live during the event this weekend. that wraps up our review preview. We hope we see you at one of our events this weekend. Injuries are something that plagues a lot of runners. We almost have all gone through it, and of course a lot of times we hear that it's running that causes it, all of our non-running friends, and I think most of us know that running is actually very helpful to us, but biomechanics, when you're doing a lot of running, can break down, and usually we're not that smart about when we're doing our running. We overtrain, we do too many miles, too fast, sometimes we go out too fast, we don't stretch appropriately, and of course there's a huge always debate about stretching, because there's some believe that you should be stretching the entire time, before, during, after. Some believe that you only stretch after the run because you don't want to stretch on more muscles. Really, the truth is that it's probably a combination of all things that are really good that we should be doing to help us be injury-free. I myself right now, I'm going through an injury. I have acute, or actually chronic Achilles tendonitis I've been dealing with for several months, and like a typical runner, you ignore the pain. Unless my foot falls off, you keep running on it, and you actually cause more and more damage to that. So I thought it'd be a great thing to do because we deal with a lot of foot issues and ankle issues and knee issues in running. And our guest, we have Dr. Frances Faro, who's an orthopedic surgeon with Orthopedic Physicians of Colorado. And we're very welcoming her to Running Denver to talk to you about injury prevention, what are some of the most common injuries and ways that you can avoid being on her operating table.
I'm Fran Faro. I am an orthopedic surgeon at Swedish Medical Center here in Colorado. I get asked a lot whether running causes injury and whether you should avoid running because of that, and I really disagree with people who say that you shouldn't run because of injury. Running itself doesn't injure you. Running itself is a natural motion, but it is when we do it too repetitively, we don't prepare our bodies correctly for it, that it becomes a problem. And so a lot of my practice is about trying to get people to run, but do it in a healthy way. Some of the most common injuries that I see from running include plantar fasciitis and different tendon problems. And I find that a lot of those stem back to improper running technique and also avoiding doing stretching, which of course none of us really like to stretch, but it is so very important. Stretching is really important to running because when we run, we strengthen our muscles. And unless we're doing dedicated stretching, those muscles get shorter. So a lot of times people ask me when it's important to stretch. Should you stretch before you run, after you run, in the middle? And the answer is yes, yes, and yes. If you could only pick one time to stretch, I would say stretch in the middle. But it would be best if you stretched in the middle and then at the end. So a lot of times when I go run, I've been running for over 20 years in many different climates and different terrains. And for me, what I do is I go out and I run about a mile and then I stop. If I'm in the city, when I'm waiting to cross the street, I stop and I stretch both my calves and my hamstrings. And then at the end of the run, you need to take that time again, and then you can lie down and really get that hamstring stretched out and stretch out your calf muscles. The two most common tightness areas that runners have are their calves and their hamstrings. But also the tensor muscle can be an area that gets tight as well. Calves and hamstrings are the big problems because those are both muscles that cross two joints. The calf muscle has its origin above the knee and then goes and inserts on the heel, so it crosses both the knee and the ankle. And if you think about a lot of the positions that we have, that calf is in a shortened position. When we sit, when we sleep, a lot of times when we're driving the car, our knee is bent and our toes are pointing down, and so the calf is in a shortened position. It's the same thing with the hamstring. The hamstring crosses both the hip joint and the knee joint, and so that also can lead to it being short a lot. They're also both big, powerful muscles. Their opposing muscles are much smaller than they are, and so they just tend to get tight. Sometimes when people are running, they start to feel an area that's achy. And the biggest mistake that they can make is to ignore it and just let that ache go into pain. So when you start feeling an area that's achy, look at your running schedule and see, have you been adding on too many miles in a week? Have you been doing the same loop with the same inclines and angles? Do you need to mix it up a little bit? And so the first thing I do is say, take a day off. Do some stretching, do something different. Cross-train a little bit, swim, bike, just do something else that helps your body move but in a different way. And then go back to that run, but maybe take a mile off, take a couple miles off, and see how it feels. And then if that feels good, ease back into it, but try to learn from what got you there in the first place. If it was the fact that you were, running in beautiful Waterton Canyon and you were always doing the same loop and maybe always experiencing the same incline, well, don't do that. So try to listen to your body. If you've done that, then the next thing to do is to look at your gear. A lot of times people don't look at their shoes as the important pieces of equipment that they are. So when I have my running buddies say, hey, I'm starting to feel a little tweak here in my foot, I say, how old are your shoes? Running shoes last for 350 to 450 miles or 90 hours of exercise, whichever comes first. A good way to keep track of the mileage on your shoes is to write the date on the heel of your shoe and then keep track of it with a running app. If your shoes are being used for too long, they start to lose some of those properties that help keep your feet happy. People ask me a lot of times, what kind of shoes should I be wearing when I'm running? And that varies from person to person just because shapes of feet and the way feet align is different. And so the number one thing you can do is go to a place where they know feet and where they will watch you walk, watch you run, and get the right shoe shape to support your foot. I don't think that you have to run with orthotics. You don't have to run with no support or tons of support. You have to run with what feels comfortable to you. So not only work with somebody who knows shoes, but then also when you put the shoes on, don't ignore little hot spots or little areas that hurt in the store because they won't work out. They'll just become problems. Make sure that your foot is really comfortable when you leave the store. The other thing that can be helpful is to have the right size of shoe. There is an interesting statistic that 90% of women wear the wrong size shoe. And before men get all smug about it, 75% of men wear the wrong sized shoe. The same rules apply to us as they do to as the rule that we use for our children. That is, you want a thumb's width in front of your toe before the end of the shoe, whether it's an athletic shoe or a dress shoe. You also want to make sure that that is happening after your foot's already swollen. So go for a run and then go shop for your running shoes because you do not want your feet to swell and then not have enough room. Sometimes I have people come to my clinic and they've got pain in their second toe. Well, their second toe's jamming up against the end of the foot. It's the wrong size shoe. So it's a really easy fix for what sometimes can be a problem that stops you from running. I think one of the big mistakes that athletes make is to think that pain is okay and to do the no pain, no gain. But we all, when we think about it, know the difference between pain that is bad and soreness. And I think when you go from soreness to pain and modifications in your training schedule, a recheck on your shoes, and a few days worth of rest doesn't make things better, then you need to come and see somebody like me. So, I mean, there are two stretches that I think are really important, and one is hamstring stretching, and the other is calf stretching. And so, as you're going on your beautiful run through Waterton Canyon, how do you stop and do a stretch? And mainly I'll find a tree or a telephone pole or something like that to stretch on. So I don't know, maybe I can be your telephone pole?
Got it.
Okay.
All right.
So here, you can. So what you want to do is you want to have both feet pointing straight ahead, and you want to bend your front knee and keep your back knee straight. Do you feel it in your calf area? Mm-hmm. Okay, so hold that stretch right there. So this is the area that you should be feeling the stretch. And if you don't feel it there, try twisting your foot over just a little bit more, and even sometimes rolling on the outer border of your foot like that. And you'll feel it through here. And then just do a nice steady stretch. Some people like to bounce. Don't bounce. Just hold it nice and steady for 30 seconds and then switch to the other side. The other stretch, did you feel it?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The other stretch is to stretch your hamstrings. And a lot of times people stretch their hamstrings 2 at a time, but the problem with stretching your hamstrings 2 at a time, so go ahead and go touch your toes. So turn to the side and touch your toes.
Yeah, this is where I get to feel my inflexibility.
But a lot of times people just bend through the lower back there. So if you're gonna stretch both at the same time, you wanna look up and throw your shoulders back a little bit and try to keep your back straight. He's super unflexible. So sometimes it's easier to stretch 1 at a time. So when I've been running for about a mile, I like to stop and stretch. And so the 2 stretches that I do are a hamstring stretch and a calf muscle stretch. The hamstring stretch, I find something, here's our friendly tree, and I'm just gonna stop and I'm going to put my feet lining up so that this back foot is pointing straight at the heel of the front one. I'm gonna bend the front knee and keep the back knee straight. This is a stretch that gets the gastroc muscle, which is right below the back of the knee. Now, if you bend your knee, then you will get the soleus muscle, but that is a smaller muscle that doesn't cross the knee, and I don't find that that is as much of a problem as the gastroc. So this is the stretch that I do. 30 seconds, both sides. If I find that I'm not getting enough of a stretch, I'll roll onto the outer border of my back foot. That actually helps lock the midfoot joints and allow you to get that stretch through the ankle rather than through the middle of your foot, which sometimes can be kind of flexible. The other stretch that I do is to stretch my hamstrings. So I get about a leg's length away from what I want to stretch on. Put my leg up, keep this leg straight, keep this leg straight, the knee straight, and then make sure that my toes are pointing straight ahead. I don't want my toes pointing out, and I don't want to bend my back knee, because that just rocks the pelvis forward and then you don't get as good of stretch. So straight, torso straight up, bend forward, and you should feel it right back here. Do that for about 30 seconds, both sides, and then go back on your run again.
Thank you to Dr. Ferraro for that very informative information about the common injuries that typically runners see and how to prevent those, as well as how to stay off of our operating table. And I know that it can be very frustrating as a runner myself dealing with injury. It's really good to heed the advice, and what's great about what she does and the advice that she's given is she's really trying to keep us all from being on our operating table. Just by doing some simple things that we tend to neglect can keep us injury free or keep our injuries down to a minimum so that we can be out there running the whole time. Next, we're going to do our gadget segment, and we want to thank Runner's Roost for being our sponsor of our gadget segment. And we're going to be actually at Runner's Roost with the magic of TV will magically appear there. We're going to be looking at the latest and greatest in GPS watches. I don't actually have a GPS watch on today. I got my nice little normal watch on, but wear one a lot of the time. And there's so much technology now, and there's so many different variations. You know, 10 years ago, it was only, you really had a couple choices, and now there's so much. He's going to be going over with us what you need, depending upon the type of running you're doing, what are some of the great technologies out there, and help you learn more about GPS watches. So stay tuned.
Hi guys, I'm Sarah Atlas and I work for Runner's Roost here in Lone Tree. So as a first-time runner, GPS watches can be a little bit tricky. There's a ton of models, obviously. So if you're beginning, you just want to look for something pretty simple. You don't need to look for anything too complicated. A really nice beginner watch would be the Garmin Forerunner 15. It's going to give you some basics such as distance, pace, time. You can even connect a heart rate monitor, and it'll give you your calories burned as well. The customer service in watches is extremely helpful. Something's going to go wrong with your GPS watch. We here at Runner's Roost are going to do our best to help you and fix that issue, but if not, it's really good to have a good customer service standing behind the watches as well. Another thing to look at in watches is the different features on them. Each one's going to do the features a little bit differently, such as heart rate, for example. Some of them, like TomTom, are going to have it mostly on the wrist. so you won't have to wear the heart rate strap. Garmin, on the other hand, does it mostly through the heart rate strap, so that's something to think about when you're looking at a watch as well. There's a lot of different price points in the watches. You definitely pay for more as the features grow up in number. The bottom price point watch is something like the Forerunner 15. That's going to be the lowest price with the most basic features. You get a two feature display on there, so you can kind of switch between them, but you can have up to 2 different ones on a screen. Basically gives you heart rate, distance, pace, time, the vital things for runners, but not overboard. As you go up to something like the 920, that's Garmin's Tri-Focus watch. That means triathletes are going to get the most benefit out of this watch. It's totally waterproof, and it gives you a lot of features such as cadence and stuff that the beginning watches aren't going to provide for you. But with that, you definitely go up in price point as well. Not all GPS watches are going to be 100% accurate. Actually, none of them really are. If you do a race, you're going to notice that you're not exactly at that 13.1 for a half marathon. Well, if you think about it, you're kind of going around people and dodging different things as you're racing, so that's going to add on a little bit of distance. But also, it's not connected to the world's most accurate satellite in the entire world, so you're also going to have some fluctuations there as well. It's not going to be a huge deal, but you're definitely going to notice a bit of discrepancy. Here at Runner's Roost, we have a 30-day return policy on our watches. Any watch is backed by this 30-day return policy. If you buy a watch and for some reason it's too much for you to figure out, you can either bring it here and all of our expert staff can help you in figuring out those features, or you can return it and get a watch that's a little bit less features and it's going to be a little bit easier to figure out for you.
That wraps up our show for this week. Thank you so much for being part of Running Denver TV. You can find out all information about the events we talked about by going to runningdenver.com. And we hope to see you next time. I'm Lonnie Summers. Thanks.